Have you ever seen a smile so sharp it could cut glass? A smile that holds all the condescension and secret triumph in the world. For Olivia Carrington, that smile came from her husband's mistress at the most vulnerable moment of her life, while she was 7 months pregnant with their first child. The woman, a dazzling socialite named Tiffany, leaned in at a glittering charity gala, her eyes mocking the swell of Olivia's stomach. But the triumph on Tiffany's face was short-lived. It dissolved into pure frozen shock the moment a man stepped out of the shadows. A man Tiffany never expected to see. A man who wasn't just Olivia's brother, but a silent titan who owned more than just companies, he owned secrets, and he was about to cash them all in. The air in their Park Avenue penthouse always felt a little too cold, even in August. Olivia Carrington adjusted the silk cushion behind her back, trying to find a comfortable position for her burgeoning 7-month belly. The city lights glittered below like a scattered handful of diamonds, a view that once filled her with wonder, but now only seemed to highlight her isolation. Her husband Ethan was a master of the universe, or at least that's what the magazines called him. His company Sterling Innovations was at the forefront of financial technology, and Ethan himself was the charismatic, handsome face of its success. Their life was a carefully curated masterpiece. Charity galas, summers in the Hamptons, winters in Aspen, and a home that looked like it had been lifted from the pages of an architectural digest. To the outside world, they were the golden couple. But Olivia knew the gold was just plating, and it was beginning to chip. Lately, Ethan had been distant, a ghost in their own home. He came home late, smelling of expensive whiskey and a perfume that wasn't hers. He'd kiss her forehead, a perfunctory gesture devoid of warmth, and murmur excuses about late-night investor meetings or troubleshooting a server crash in Singapore. He'd look at her belly with a strained smile that didn't reach his tired, calculating eyes. "It's just the pressure, Liv," he'd say, running a hand through his perfectly styled dark hair. "This new platform launch is a monster. Once it's done, it'll be just you, me, and the little one. I promise." Olivia wanted to believe him. She loved the man she had married 5 years ago, the ambitious but kind man who quoted poetry and remembered her favorite type of flower. But that man was fading, replaced by a stranger who checked his phone incessantly, his thumb swiping through messages with a guarded intensity. Tonight was the annual Starlight Foundation benefit, the crown jewel of the city's philanthropic calendar. Olivia hadn't wanted to go. Her ankles were swollen, and the thought of squeezing into a couture maternity gown and making small talk for hours was exhausting. But Ethan had been insistent. "We have to show a united front, Liv. David Chen will be there. We need his firm's backing for the next round of funding. It's crucial." So here she was standing in their cavernous walk-in closet, while a stylist fussed with the draping of her emerald green gown. The color was meant to complement her auburn hair, but she just felt like a large, sad jewel on display. Ethan walked in already in his tuxedo. He looked impeccable, his smile camera-ready. "Wow," he said, his eyes scanning her. "You look magnificent." The compliment felt hollow, rehearsed. He fastened his platinum cufflinks, his reflection in the mirror, looking past her. His phone buzzed on the marble countertop. He picked it up, his back to her. She saw his shoulders relax, a genuine smile, the kind he used to give her, briefly touching his lips as he typed a quick reply. He quickly deleted the thread, a practiced fluid motion. The chill in the room deepened. "Who was that?" Olivia asked, her voice softer than she intended. "Just David's assistant confirming our table," he said, without turning around. "You ready? The car is waiting." She wasn't. She wanted to scream and demand the truth. She wanted to throw his perfectly polished shoes out the 40th story window. But she thought of the baby, her tiny daughter kicking gently against her ribs, and swallowed her words. For the baby she would play her part. For the baby she would endure one more night in their gilded cage. As they rode down in the private elevator, The silence was suffocating. Ethan was scrolling through market reports on his phone, already detached. Olivia rested a hand on her stomach, a silent promise to the little life within her. I will protect you, she thought, no matter what. She had no idea that tonight, that promise would be tested in a way she could never have imagined. She felt utterly alone, unaware that the one person in the world who could truly protect her was already moving pieces on a chessboard she didn't even know existed. The ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was a dizzying spectacle of wealth and influence. Chandeliers dripped crystals like frozen waterfalls, casting a warm glow over hundreds of guests in designer gowns and bespoke tuxedos. The air hummed with the clinking of champagne flutes and the low murmur of conversations about stock portfolios and summering in St. Bart's. For Olivia, it felt like drowning in a sea of superficiality. Ethan had abandoned her almost immediately, steering his business partner David Chen towards a group of potential investors. "Just networking, darling," he'd said, with a quick dismissive kiss to her cheek. "I'll be right back." An hour passed. Olivia found a small plush armchair in a slightly less crowded alcove, sipping a glass of sparkling water and trying to look elegantly serene rather than miserably abandoned. She watched Ethan across the room. He was magnetic, effortlessly charming the crowd. He laughed, his head tilted back, a picture of success. And standing just a little too close to him was a woman. She was stunning in a way that was both obvious and aggressive. Her dress was a column of crimson silk that seemed poured onto her statuesque frame. Platinum blonde hair, lips the same shade as her dress, and diamonds at her ears and throat that greedily caught the light. Olivia had seen her before in society. Blogs, Tiffany Jenkins, a lifestyle influencer and professional party guest who always seemed to be attached to the arm of some powerful man. Olivia watched as Tiffany placed a perfectly manicured hand on Ethan's forearm, her laughter loud and theatrical. Ethan didn't pull away. He leaned in, whispering something in her ear that made her smile widen. A hot, sickening wave of jealousy and betrayal washed over Olivia. This was it. This was the source of the strange perfume. The late nights, the secret smiles at his phone. It was all horribly painfully real. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to flee, to run from the ballroom, and the hundreds of eyes she imagined were pitying her. But she was rooted to the spot, a prisoner of decorum. Then, the woman Tiffany detached herself from Ethan and began making her way through the crowd. Her eyes scanned the room, and for one horrifying second, they locked with Olivia's. There was no hesitation. With the predatory grace of a shark sensing blood, Tiffany changed her trajectory and headed directly for her. Olivia's breath hitched. "Be calm. Be dignified," she told herself, her hand instinctively cradling her belly. Tiffany stopped in front of her chair, looking down at Olivia, with an expression that was a perfect blend of feigned sympathy and utter contempt. "Olivia, isn't it?" she said, her voice smooth and syrupy. "It's so brave of you to come out tonight in your condition." The word hung in the air, weighted with insult. "I'm pregnant, Tiffany, not terminally ill," Olivia replied, her voice impressively steady. Tiffany let out a small tinkling laugh. "Of course. It's just such a transformative time. For a woman, everything changes. Your body, your priorities, your husband's, attention span." The jab was surgical in its precision. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. Tiffany leaned in closer, her expensive perfume a cloying cloud. Her gaze dropped pointedly to Olivia's swollen stomach and then back to her eyes. A slow, triumphant smile spread across her face. It was a smile of ownership, a smile that said, "I have what you think is yours. He comes to me when he's tired of this. I am the future, and you are the past." "You know," Tiffany continued in a conspiratorial whisper, "Ethan is all about the new ventures, new technology, new beginnings. You have to be able to keep up." And that was it. the confirmation delivered with a smile meant to shatter Olivia's world. In that moment, surrounded by 1,000 people, Olivia had never felt so utterly humiliated. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She looked past Tiffany, searching for Ethan, hoping for a savior. He was still across the room, oblivious, laughing with another investor. He wasn't going to save her. He was the reason she was drowning. Olivia just stared, speechless, her world crumbling. Tiffany's smile widened, savoring her victory. She had won. The pregnant, matronly wife had been put in her place. But the victory was fleeting. Tiffany's triumphant expression began to falter, her smile freezing on her perfectly painted lips. Her eyes, which had been locked on Olivia, had flickered to a point just over Olivia's shoulder. The color drained from her face, replaced by a pale, waxy shock. The confident posture evaporated her shoulders, hunching almost imperceptibly. The smirk was gone, replaced by the slack-jawed look of a cornered animal. Olivia, confused by the sudden shift, heard a low, calm voice from behind her. A voice she knew better than her own. "I find," the voice said, each word laced with Arctic chill, "that new beginnings often lead to very abrupt endings. Isn't that right, Miss Jenkins?" Olivia didn't need to turn around. The voice was an anchor in her swirling sea of despair. It was the voice of her older brother, Noah Prescott. Noah was not a man who commanded attention with loud words or flashy suits. His power was a quiet, immense gravity that bent the world around him. While Ethan built his empire on algorithms and venture capital, Noah's company, Northgate Holdings, dealt in the old world of tangible assets, shipping real estate, and corporate restructuring. He was the kind of man who bought companies, stripped them down, and sold them for parts, all without ever raising his voice. He was fiercely private and even more fiercely protective of Olivia, especially since their parents had passed away a decade ago. He stepped around the armchair, positioning himself between Olivia and Tiffany. He wasn't as tall as Ethan, but his presence seemed to consume all the air in the alcove. He wore a simple, impeccably tailored black suit, no frills, no flashy watch. His focus was entirely on Tiffany, and his eyes, a cool, piercing grey, were utterly devoid of emotion. Tiffany Jenkins, who had just moments before been the picture of predatory confidence, now looked like a fragile doll. She visibly swallowed her hand, fluttering nervously near her throat. "Noah," she breathed, her voice a reedy whisper. She had clearly not expected him to be there. He wasn't on the guest list. He despised these events. "Ms. Jenkins," he said, his tone flat and cold, "you seem to have my sister at a disadvantage." "No, I was just congratulating her," Tiffany stammered, attempting to reassemble her composure. It was a pathetic attempt. Noah's lips curved into something that was not a smile. It was a baring of teeth. "Were you? It looked to me like you were discussing new beginnings. Let's talk about those. I know you're fond of them. For instance, the new beginning you had after you left your last benefactor, the real estate mogul from Miami, the one whose wife filed a very messy, very public lawsuit that named you specifically." Tiffany flinched as if he'd struck her. Her face went from pale to ghostly white. I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I think you do," Noah continued, taking a small step closer. He didn't loom, but his proximity was menacing. "I also know about the new beginning you're planning with the funds Ethan has been unwisely diverting from Sterling Innovations' operational accounts into a private holding company registered in the Cayman Islands, a company to which you are the sole signatory." The air crackled. This was no longer about a simple affair. Olivia stared up at her brother, her own shock momentarily eclipsing her heartbreak. How could he know that Tiffany was frozen solid? The mask of the sophisticated socialite had completely shattered, revealing the terrified, greedy woman beneath. Her eyes darted around as if looking for an escape route, but Noah held her pinned with his gaze. That's a lie, she whispered, but the words had no conviction. Is it? Noah's voice dropped even lower, becoming a lethal purr. My forensic accountants are exceptionally good at their jobs. They can trace a digital dollar through a labyrinth of shell corporations faster than you can order a glass of champagne. The transfer of $300,000 last Tuesday, for example, coded as marketing consultation. A rather steep price for your particular brand of consultation. He knew. He knew everything. Olivia realized with a jolt that Noah's presence here wasn't a coincidence. He hadn't just stumbled upon the scene. He had come for a reason. Across the room, Ethan had finally noticed the tense tableau. He saw his lover pale and terrified, and his brother-in-law radiating cold fury. A look of panic flashed across his face. He started to make his way over a fake placating smile already forming on his lips. Noah didn't even glance in his direction. His final words were for Tiffany alone. So, you'll forgive me if I'm skeptical about your well wishes for my sister's future, he said, his voice like the scrape of steel on stone. You are not a new beginning. You are a liability, and I always deal with my family's liabilities. He then did something that sealed her humiliation. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a simple, crisp business card for Northgate Holdings, and pressed it into her trembling hand. Give this to your lawyer, he said softly. You're going to need him. With that, he turned his back on her completely, his attention shifting to Olivia. His expression softened instantly, the icy rage replaced with profound concern. Liv, are you okay? Let's get you home. He helped her to her feet, his arm a solid protective presence around her. As they turned to leave, Ethan finally arrived, his face a mask of confusion and forced bonhomie. Noah. What a surprise. What's going on, Tiffany? Are you all right? Ethan asked, looking between the three of them. Noah didn't even stop walking. He looked straight at his brother-in-law, his eyes promising a reckoning. We'll talk later, Ethan, he said. And the way he said it made it clear it wasn't a suggestion. It was a verdict. The ride back to the penthouse was a blur of silent tears for Olivia and stony silence from Noah. The chauffeur, a long-time employee of Noah's, drove with practiced discretion, his eyes fixed on the road. Noah had simply wrapped a large protective hand over Olivia's on the seat between them, a gesture of solidarity that spoke more than words ever could. When they arrived, the penthouse felt different. It was no longer a home, but a crime scene. Every piece of art, every designer chair felt like a prop in a life that was a lie. Ethan arrived 10 minutes later, having clearly rushed from the gala. He burst through the door, his face flushed, a frantic energy about him. What the hell was that, Noah? He demanded, throwing his keys onto a glass table with a clatter. You can't just show up and publicly threaten my guests. Your guest, Noah repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. He hadn't moved from his position beside Olivia on the sofa. Is that what you're calling her now? It was a misunderstanding, Ethan blustered, avoiding Olivia's gaze. Tiffany can be a bit forward. You humiliated her. You humiliated me. Olivia finally found her voice, a ragged, broken thing. You humiliated me, Ethan. I stood there pregnant with your child while your mistress insulted me, and you did nothing. You saw what was happening, and you did nothing. It wasn't like that, he insisted, his desperation growing. Liv, baby, you have to believe me. She means nothing. It was a mistake, a stupid, meaningless mistake. Was the Cayman Islands account a mistake? Noah interjected, his voice slicing through Ethan's pathetic excuses. Was siphoning hundreds of thousands of dollars from your company's operating budget a stupid, meaningless mistake? Ethan froze, his face paling. The carefully constructed facade of the confident CEO crumbled in an instant, revealing the panicked, cornered man beneath. You don't know what you're talking about. My business finances are none of your concern. They became my concern, Noah said, standing up to his full height. The moment you started leveraging assets that belonged to my sister. Olivia looked from her husband to her brother, confused. What assets? What is he talking about, Ethan? Ethan wouldn't look at her. He stared at Noah, a mixture of fear and hatred in his eyes. Noah's voice was cold and methodical, like a surgeon outlining a terminal diagnosis. For the past 6 months, I've had a feeling something was wrong. You were too stressed, Ethan. Too desperate for this new round of funding. It didn't add up with the success story you were selling. So I had a quiet look into Sterling Innovations. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the cavernous room. It's a house of cards, Ethan. You over-leveraged the company on a high-risk gamble with your new platform, and it isn't paying off. Your burn rate is astronomical. You've been cooking the books for the last two quarters to hide the losses from your board and investors, including David Chen. You're not on the verge of success. You're on the verge of catastrophic collapse. Every word was a hammer blow dismantling the reality Olivia had been living in. Her husband wasn't just a cheater, he was a fraud. The money you've been giving Tiffany, Noah continued, his gaze relentless, wasn't your money to give. It was investor capital, company funds, and worse, to secure a bridging loan. 2 months ago, you put up collateral. You signed a personal guarantee. So what? Ethan spat, trying to regain some semblance of defiance. It's my company. No, it's not just yours, Noah said, his voice dropping. He turned to Olivia, his expression softening with regret, as if pained to be the one to tell her. Liv, when you got married, Dad's estate lawyer set up a marital trust for you. It contains your inheritance, stocks, bonds. The deed to the summer house. It was structured so that while you are the sole beneficiary, your spouse has certain limited managerial rights, provided it's for mutual financial benefit. Ethan used his position as your husband to list the assets in that trust as collateral for his failing company's loan. Olivia felt the air leave her lungs. It wasn't just his betrayal of their marriage vows. He had gambled with her future, her family's legacy, the security she was meant to pass on to their child. You promised, she whispered, the words catching in her throat as she looked at Ethan. You promised you would never touch that. Ethan finally looked at her, and she saw no remorse in his eyes, only the raw panic of a man whose schemes had been exposed. I was going to pay it back. Once the platform launched, the money would have come pouring in. I did it for us. You did it for yourself, Noah corrected him coldly. You risked my sister's entire inheritance to fund your ego and keep your girlfriend in diamonds. And when the bank calls in that loan, and they will, now that I've had a quiet word with their risk assessment department, they won't be seizing Sterling Innovations' worthless shares. They'll be coming for Olivia's trust. They'll be coming for her home. The silence that followed was absolute. The truth, in all its ugly, devastating detail, lay bare on the expensive rug between them. Ethan, the charismatic genius, was a liar, a cheat and a thief who had been willing to sacrifice his wife and unborn child's future to save himself. Olivia felt a strange calm descend upon her. The heartbreak was still there, a deep, aching wound, but it was now overlaid with a cold, hard layer of fury. She looked at the man she thought she knew, the father of her child, and saw a complete stranger. Get out, she said, her voice quiet but filled with unshakable resolve. Liv, please, he begged, taking a step towards her. Noah moved to block him. You heard her. This is my home, Ethan yelled, his voice cracking. Not anymore, Olivia said, standing up, her hand resting on her belly like a shield. You made your choice, Ethan. Now live with it. Get out of my sight. The days that followed were a blur of legal meetings and painful revelations. Noah moved Olivia out of the penthouse and into a suite at the Carlisle, a place filled with memories of happier times with her parents. He transformed the suite's living room into a command center. It was here that Olivia began to understand the true scope of her brother's power. It wasn't just about money, it was about information influence and a strategic, ruthless mind that saw the world as an intricate game of leverage. He introduced her to Ms. Albright, a divorce attorney whose reputation was whispered with a mixture of fear and reverence in New York's elite circles. She was a woman in her late 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that Olivia found immensely comforting. "Let's be clear, Olivia," Ms. Albright said during their first meeting, her pen tapping a rhythm on a thick folder. "Ethan's infidelity is the emotional core of this, but it is the financial fraud that will be our hammer. Men like Ethan don't understand heartbreak. They understand consequences." Noah laid it all out on the conference table. Financial statements, offshore account details, loan agreements. It was a dizzying web of deceit. Ethan hadn't just used Olivia's trust as collateral. He had systematically misrepresented its value, inflated his company's projected earnings, and committed what amounted to bank fraud. "He's been playing a shell game," Noah explained, pointing to a flowchart he'd drawn on a whiteboard. "He moves money from investor A to pay off debt B, all while promising future profits to investor C. Tiffany was just a symptom of the disease, a very expensive symptom. He was spending lavishly to maintain the illusion of success. The cars, the parties, her gifts. It was all part of the branding." "So, what happens now?" Olivia asked, feeling overwhelmed. "The bank. Will they take everything?" "No," Noah said, his voice firm. "They won't, because they made a mistake. They were so eager for Ethan's business that they accepted the collateral agreement without performing proper due diligence. Ms. Albright is about to have a very pointed conversation with their legal department about their complicity in accepting a fraudulent application. We will argue that the guarantee he signed is null and void due to his misrepresentation. And if that doesn't work, then we move to phase 2, Noah said, his eyes glinting. "I've been in touch with a few of Sterling Innovation's other board members. They're not happy. I may have, anonymously, shared some of my forensic accountant's findings. An emergency board meeting is being called for Friday. Ethan is about to be very, very busy." He wasn't just protecting Olivia. He was dismantling Ethan's life piece by painstaking piece. His calls were quiet, his emails encrypted. He moved with a silent efficiency that was terrifying to behold. He had lunch with David Chen, Ethan's business partner, who left the meeting looking pale and shaken. He spoke with columnists at major financial papers, seeding stories of rumored instability at Sterling Innovations. The company's stock, which was already fragile, began to slide. Olivia watched it all, a strange mix of awe and sorrow churning within her. She was mourning the man she thought Ethan was, the life she thought they would have. But with each piece of evidence of his deceit, a new strength grew in its place. This was no longer just about being a victim. It was about survival. One afternoon, Ms. Albright produced a document that made Olivia's blood run cold. It was a power of attorney form, supposedly signed by Olivia, granting Ethan broad control over her financial accounts in the event of her incapacitation. "When did you sign this?" Ms. Albright asked gently. Olivia stared at the looping, elegant signature at the bottom. I never have. I've never seen this document before in my life." Ms. Albright nodded slowly, as if she had expected this. "We'll send it for forensic analysis, but I'm quite certain I know what they'll find. The signature is an almost perfect forgery." The weight of this new betrayal was suffocating. He hadn't just used a loophole in their marital trust. He had actively forged her name. He had planned to take everything likely under the guise of her being incapacitated by pregnancy or childbirth. It was premeditated, cold, and utterly monstrous. That night, Olivia couldn't sleep. She stood by the window of the hotel suite, looking out at the city that now felt so alien. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "You're making a huge mistake. Don't think you can destroy him. You'll be left with nothing." Olivia knew instantly who it was from. Tiffany. The message was pathetic, a desperate threat from a woman whose gravy train was about to derail. A week ago, it would have terrified her. Tonight, it barely registered. She typed a simple reply, her fingers steady. "I already have everything I need." She then blocked the number and rested a hand on her stomach, where her daughter kicked a tiny, reassuring flutter. Noah was building a financial fortress around them, but Olivia was building a different kind of fortress within herself. One made of resolve, maternal love, and a strength she never knew she possessed. The gilded cage was broken, and she was learning how to fly. Tiffany Jenkins lived her life by a simple, brutal calculus. A woman's value was directly proportional to the wealth of the man she was with. For the last year, Ethan Carrington had been her blue-chip stock, a guaranteed investment in a future of Chanel bags and summers on the Amalfi Coast. She wasn't in love with him. Love was a luxury she couldn't afford. She was invested in his success, his power, and the status it conferred upon her. Now her stock was plummeting, and panic was setting in. The first sign of trouble was the rejection of her Amex Black card at Bergdorf's. The cashier's polite, pitying smile was more insulting than an outright accusation. Then came the call from the dealership. The lease payment for her Maserati was overdue. Ethan, who had always been so attentive, was suddenly impossible to reach. His texts were short and dismissive, full of frantic excuses about board meetings and legal troubles. The whispers started soon after. At a luncheon she attended, she felt the temperature in the room drop when she approached. Women who had once fawned over her now offered tight, dismissive smiles and turned their backs. The story of her confrontation with Olivia at the gala had spread like wildfire, painted in the most unflattering light possible. She was no longer the seductive homewrecker. She was the classless fool who had picked a fight with Noah Prescott's sister. And Noah Prescott was a name that inspired fear. Unlike the new money tech billionaires, his was an old quiet power that ran deep beneath the city. To cross him was to become a ghost erased from guest lists, blacklisted from boards, your credit lines mysteriously drying up. Tiffany was quickly learning the brutal reality of that power. Desperate, she drove to Ethan's office, a sleek glass tower in Hudson Yards. She used her keycard, but it beeped red. Access denied. The security guard at the front desk, a man who used to greet her with a deferential nod, now looked at her with cold indifference. "I'm sorry, Miss Jenkins. Mr. Carrington is in a meeting. He's left instructions not to be disturbed." "I'll wait," she said, her voice sharp. "The lobby is for scheduled appointments only." He replied, his tone final. Humiliated, she retreated to the street, her rage simmering. This was all Olivia's fault. The mousy pregnant wife who should have quietly accepted her fate was somehow fighting back. And it was all because of her brother. Tiffany's desperation curdled into a reckless plan. If she could just talk to Olivia, woman to woman, she could fix this. She could appeal to her, threaten her something. She found out from a gossipy acquaintance where Olivia was staying the Carlisle. She walked into the hotel lobby, trying to project an aura of casual wealth as if she belonged there. She took the elevator up to Olivia's floor and found the suite. She knocked, her heart pounding. The door was opened, not by Olivia, but by a severe-looking woman with grey hair pulled into a tight bun. It was Ms. Albright. "Can I help you?" the lawyer asked, her eyes sweeping over Tiffany in a dismissive, analytical glance. "I'm here to see Olivia Carrington. I'm a friend," Tiffany lied. Ms. Albright's lips thinned into a semblance of a smile. "I am Ms. Albright, Mrs. Carrington's legal counsel. Olivia is not receiving any friends today, or any other day. Any and all communication you wish to have with my client can be directed through my office." "This is a personal matter," Tiffany insisted, trying to peer around the lawyer into the suite. "I assure you," Ms. Albright said, her voice dropping to a glacial temperature, "that given the circumstances, including potential civil action against you for the recovery of misappropriated funds, There is nothing personal about your relationship with my client. It is now entirely and irrevocably a legal matter. Goodbye, Ms. Jenkins." The door closed with a soft final click. Defeated, Tiffany retreated. The world she had so carefully constructed was collapsing. The men she had relied on were gone. Ethan was a sinking ship, and no other man of his caliber would touch her now that she was on Noah Prescott's bad side. Later that week, she received a letter via courier. It was from Ms. Albright's law firm. It was a formal notice of intent to sue, demanding the immediate return of $785,000, the sum their forensic accountants had traced from Sterling Innovations accounts to her possession, itemized with chilling precision cash transfers, rent payments on her Soho loft jewelry, the Maserati lease. She stared at the number, feeling dizzy. She didn't have that money. She had spent it. It was gone, converted into clothes she could no longer be seen in, and a lifestyle she could no longer afford. She tried calling Ethan one last time. He finally picked up his voice, a ragged whisper. "What do you want, Tiffany?" "Ethan, they're suing me. Olivia's lawyer. They want everything back. You have to help me." A harsh, bitter laugh came down the line. Help you. You, my company, is being dismantled. The board has suspended me. I'm being investigated for fraud. My life is over, and it's all because you couldn't keep your mouth shut at that stupid party. You brought Noah Prescott down on us." "Me?" she shrieked. "You're the one who was lying to everyone. You were a beautiful distraction, Tiffany. That's all you were ever supposed to be," he said, his voice laced with venom. "You've become far too expensive. Goodbye." The line went dead. Tiffany Jenkins sat in her too expensive loft, surrounded by things she no longer owned, and for the first time the brutal calculus of her life gave her the answer she had always feared: zero. She had backed the wrong man, underestimated the quiet wife, and provoked a titan. She was left with nothing but the bitter taste of her own triumphant, foolish smile. The deposition was held in a sterile conference room at Ms. Albright's firm high above Madison Avenue. The air was thick with tension. Olivia sat on one side of the polished mahogany table flanked by Ms. Albright and Noah. Ethan sat opposite them, looking haggard and diminished next to his own lawyer, a flustered man who seemed out of his depth. The past few weeks had been a relentless assault on Ethan's empire. The board of Sterling Innovations had officially ousted him as CEO. The Securities and Exchange Commission had opened a formal investigation. His business partner, David Chen, had cooperated fully with Noah, eager to save his own skin and cut ties with the sinking ship. Today's deposition was focused on the forged power of attorney document. "Mr. Carrington," Ms. Albright began, her voice calm and even, "I'm showing you what has been marked as Exhibit C. Do you recognize this document?" Ethan glanced at it. "It appears to be a power of attorney form. And do you recognize the signature of the principal, purportedly your wife, Olivia Carrington?" Ethan's lawyer shifted nervously. "My client asserts his Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination." Ms. Albright smiled faintly. "Of course he does. Let the record show the witness is refusing to answer. We have a report from a certified forensic document examiner confirming with 99.9% certainty that the signature is a forgery. A very skilled one, but a forgery nonetheless." Olivia watched Ethan. He wouldn't look at her. He just stared at the wood grain of the table, his jaw tight. This was it, the final undeniable proof of his soulless betrayal. But Noah, who had been silent until now, leaned forward slightly. "Actually, Ms. Albright," he said, drawing all eyes to him, "I believe Mr. Carrington will want to answer some questions, especially about the origins of this document." Ethan's head snapped up, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. Noah looked directly at Ethan. "You're a tech guy, Ethan, a software man. You're not an artist. You could never forge a signature this perfectly. You had to have a template, a high-resolution sample to work from. Where did you get it?" Ethan remained silent, but a bead of sweat trickled down his temple. "Let me help you," Noah continued, his voice dangerously soft. "You got it from the paperwork you both signed for the life insurance policies last year, didn't you? Handled by Westlake Financial Group, specifically by a senior partner you were introduced to, a partner who encouraged you to take on more risk, who suggested certain creative accounting methods." A dawning horror mixed with confusion spread across Ethan's face. How do you know that?" And here Noah played his final card, the twist that Olivia never saw coming. "Because I own Westlake Financial Group," Noah said simply. "It's one of Northgate's subsidiary holdings, and the senior partner, who was advising you, a man named Mr. Peters, has been on my payroll for 15 years. He reported every single meeting, every single ill-advised venture, and every single morally bankrupt idea you had directly to me." The room was utterly silent. Olivia stared at her brother, her mind reeling. Ms. Albright's professional composure finally cracked her eyebrows, shooting up in surprise. Ethan looked as though he'd been struck by lightning. "What? Why?" "Because when my sister married you, I prayed I was wrong about you," Noah said, his voice now filled with a raw, cold anger that he had kept hidden until this moment. "I saw the ambition in your eyes, and I hoped it was tempered with integrity, but I don't operate on hope. I operate on data. So I put a system in place, a quiet observer. For years, Mrs. Peters just reported that you were ambitious and a little reckless. But then, about a year ago, your behavior changed. You became desperate. You started talking about Olivia's trust. You met Tiffany." He let that sink in before delivering the final, devastating blow. "You think Tiffany found you, Ethan? A woman with her history of targeting wealthy married men. That was no coincidence. She was introduced into your circle by an acquaintance who also coincidentally owes me a significant favor. Tiffany wasn't the cause of your downfall. She was a catalyst, a stress test designed to see just how low you would sink, and you failed spectacularly. Tiffany wasn't the predator. She was the bait." Ethan was speechless, his mouth opening and closing, with no sound coming out. He had thought he was the master manipulator, the smartest man in the room. In reality, he had been a lab rat in Noah's experiment, and every move he made, every secret he kept, was being logged, recorded, and analyzed. "The gala," Olivia whispered, finally understanding. "You being there? I knew Tiffany was planning to confront you," Noah said, turning to her, his voice softening. "Mr. Peters had heard Ethan complaining about your moods and how he'd told Tiffany to handle it. I knew it would be a public display, and I decided it was time to end the experiment. I let you see the truth, but I was never going to let you face it alone." The entire affair, the slow-motion car crash of her marriage, hadn't been an accident. It had been an immaculately controlled demolition. Noah hadn't just reacted to the crisis. He had orchestrated the stage upon which it would play out, ensuring he controlled the outcome from the very beginning. He had let Ethan have just enough rope, confident that he would inevitably hang himself. And he had. Ethan finally broke. He slumped in his chair, a completely broken man, defeated not just by his own greed, but by a strategic mind so far beyond his comprehension that he had never even seen the bars of his cage. The fight was over. Noah hadn't just won. He had revealed there was never even a contest. The final courtroom proceeding was a media circus, but inside the hushed, wood-paneled room, it felt like the world had shrunk to just a few key players. Olivia sat between Noah and Ms. Albright, a silent portrait of stoicism. She refused to give the reporters the satisfaction of a tear-streaked, victimized photo. Across the room, Ethan Carrington stood to hear his sentence. He was a ghost of the man he'd been, his bespoke suit hanging loosely on a frame, diminished by stress and public disgrace. His charisma was gone, replaced by a hollowed-out expression of defeat. When the judge handed down the sentence, 2 years in a federal correctional facility, a lifetime ban from the financial industry, and restitution payments that would strip him of every last ill-gotten asset. Olivia felt no surge of victory. There was no joy, only the somber, heavy finality of a door slamming shut. She thought of the man she had once loved. The man who quoted poetry on their first date and mourned him for the last time. As they led Ethan away, his eyes briefly met hers. In them she saw not remorse, but a flash of bitter resentment, the final confirmation that the man she married had never truly existed. Tiffany Jenkins, in a desperate attempt to avoid prosecution for her role in receiving stolen funds, had agreed to testify against Ethan. Her testimony painted a pathetic picture of a woman whose own greed had made her a willing pawn. Afterward, she simply disappeared. The social columns that had once breathlessly documented her every move now pretended she had never existed. Olivia would later hear a rumor from Ms. Albright Tiffany was spotted working at a makeup counter in a Scottsdale department store. Her name changed the diamonds and dreams replaced by the harsh reality of an hourly wage. The weeks that followed were a quiet, deliberate process of dismantling a life. Olivia oversaw the packing of the Park Avenue penthouse, a place that now felt like a mausoleum of lies. She methodically sorted through years of memories, keeping the few items that predated Ethan's deceit and discarding the rest. She sold the art, the furniture, the jewelry he had given her, all of it tainted. It wasn't about the money, it was a purification ritual, a shedding of a skin that no longer fit. The proceeds were the first donation to a fund she was already planning. 2 months later, in the peaceful quiet of a private hospital room, Olivia's world was reborn. After 12 hours of labor, she held her daughter for the first time. The baby was tiny, perfect, with a dusting of auburn hair just like her own. As she looked into the infant's deep, trusting eyes, the last of the bitterness and pain in Olivia's heart washed away, replaced by a fierce, primal wave of love and purpose that was more real than anything she had ever felt. She named her Grace for the unexpected gift she was, and for the state of being Olivia now aspired to. In that moment, she was no longer the wronged wife of Ethan Carrington. She was Grace's mother, a title that felt infinitely more powerful. She did not want Grace's first home to be a place of temporary refuge, like a hotel. With Noah's help, she found a historic brownstone in the West Village, nestled on a quiet tree-lined street. It was the antithesis of the penthouse. It had old wooden floors that creaked, a small overgrown garden in the back, and a fireplace that crackled with warmth. It had character. It had a soul. Olivia spent weeks nesting, not with interior designers, but with her own 2 hands painting walls, choosing fabrics and planting rose bushes in the garden. She was creating a sanctuary, a fortress of warmth and love for her and her daughter. As Grace grew from an infant into a curious toddler, so did Olivia's vision for her own future. The idea that had simmered within her began to take shape. She met with Ms. Albright not as a client, but as a collaborator. Together, they sketched out the framework for a new nonprofit, the Prescott Foundation for Women's Economic Independence. Its mission was simple and direct: to provide top-tier legal and financial forensic services to women who were being financially defrauded or abused by their powerful partners, women who, unlike her, did not have a Noah Prescott to call. 18 months after Ethan's sentencing, the foundation was celebrating its first major victory. They had helped a young mother untangle a web of offshore accounts her husband had used to hide his assets, securing a fair settlement that guaranteed the future for her and her children. Olivia sat in her office, a modest but bright space, and read the grateful letter from the woman, her heart swelling with a pride she had never known in her old life. That evening, she was in the garden pushing a giggling Grace on a small swing set when Noah arrived. He no longer looked like a corporate titan on a mission, but simply an uncle. His tie loosened a stuffed bear for his niece under his arm. "I heard about the Miller case," he said, smiling as he watched Grace swing. Congratulations, you're actually doing it, Liv. We're doing it, she corrected him gently. I never would have had the strength if you hadn't shown me that fighting back was an option. He grew quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. You know, he said softly, for all the deals I've made, for all the companies I've dismantled, I've never been as terrified as I was that night at the gala. Not for the business, but for you. Seeing that look on your face. My plan was ruthless, and I don't regret it, but the only thing that mattered was getting you out of that summonage. Olivia stopped the swing and hugged her daughter close. She looked at her brother, the man who had been her silent guardian, her ruthless protector. You didn't just get me out, Noah, she said, her voice clear and steady. You showed me how to build my own door. They stood together as the sun set, the warm light filtering through the leaves. Olivia looked from her brother's kind face to her daughter's joyful one. She was not a millionaire's wife or a millionaire's sister. She was Olivia, a mother, a founder, a survivor. She had lost a life built on a glittering, hollow illusion, but in its place she had built a real one, grounded in truth, purpose, and an unshakable love. And as Grace reached out a tiny hand toward the setting sun, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that this new beginning was infinitely more valuable than any fortune. Olivia's story isn't just about betrayal. It's a powerful testament to the fact that true strength often reveals itself in our darkest moments. She thought she was facing a condescending mistress, but she was actually witnessing the final act of a desperate conman. Her journey shows us that the most formidable family isn't built on shared wealth, but on unwavering loyalty and a fierce will to protect one another. It's a reminder that sometimes the end of a life you thought you wanted is the beginning of the one you were truly meant to live. What did you think of Noah's masterful plan? Was it brilliant justice or a cold, calculated revenge? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear about the power of resilience, and be sure to subscribe for more real-life dramas. Your support helps us bring these incredible stories to light.